Baltimore City Council Ways and Means Committee, we're back for Council Bill 21-0080, Ordinance of Estimates for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. Eric Costello, Chair of the Committee, 11th District, joined by Council members Chris Burnett, 8th District, Mark Conway, 4th District, Odette Ramos, 14th District, Vice President Sharon Milton, 6th District, Council President Nick Mosby, and council members Robert Soak, 12th District, Ryan Dorsey, 3rd District, Isaac Izzy Schleifer, 5th District. We have Natasha Mihu and Nina Themlis on behalf of Mayor Brandon Scott. We have Nikki Thompson and Matt Stegman on behalf of Council President Nick Mosby. We're here for Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation. Mr. Heimowitz, take it away.
Mr. Chair, council members, sorry about that. Thanks for having me here. I'm Dan Heimowitz, the Director of the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation. So yeah, really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the work of our office and our budget for the upcoming fiscal year. I thought I could briefly start with an overview of what our office does. Then was going to talk a little bit about the work that we've done during this very exceptional COVID period that we've been working and living through, and then a bit about how I see our role and function evolving under the leadership of Mayor Scott. So, starting off just with a bit about what our office is and does. So, the Office of Performance and Innovation has a few different component parts. First, I'll talk about CityStat. That's the accountability and data analysis office. And a big part of what we do is through so-called stat meetings, through which we review agency performance towards key goals, and use those meetings and the data analysis we bring into those settings to understand challenges and how to improve services for residents. Our Data Fellows program is a newer part of the office. In contrast to the CityStat office, this is basically a support function for city agencies. So basically through the Data Fellows program, we have a couple of data analysts who we actually detail to agencies to help them use data more effectively to improve their own operations. And then finally is the Mayor's Innovation Team, which is a team that uses data and human-centered design to deeply understand key challenges and then work with partners and stakeholders to develop new solutions using those tools. So COVID's been a unusual period for a lot of the agencies. I'm sure you've been hearing from today and will hear from over the next few days. For us, for OPI, it has been a quite exceptional period, and essentially we've reorganized almost everything we're doing to bring data and human-centered design to the most urgent needs of the moment. I'll give a couple examples of what that has entailed during this COVID period, which we're still working through. So first of all, in terms of our helping the city's use of data during this period, we worked very closely in collaboration with the Department of Health to build one of the most detailed and extensive public dashboards with COVID-19 data. And I think we're really proud in particular of the way the dashboard pushed the envelope in terms of publishing data, particularly in terms of demographic data, for instance, that highlighted disparities and provided that information in a very transparent way that we thought was quite important. That's one example. I'll give another type of example. Given the unusual situation we were in, there's all kinds of ways that the city needs to manage things we weren't used to managing. So for example, we never had a city that did teleworking before, or city government that did teleworking prior to COVID. So suddenly, we needed a way to track and manage where our workforce was and what they were doing. Were folks working from home? Were they sick? Were they still working in the office? So we developed a pretty complex system to be able to track that information, to give city leaders visibility into where the workforce was and what we were doing. And that's just one example of a number of types of tools that we've helped stand up during COVID. Again, a bit different than like a city stat meeting, because it's really about data for operational use by government. But again, we thought really important, given the situation that we were in. A couple more examples, more in terms of what the innovation team has been able to support during COVID. So, early on in the pandemic, the innovation team helped lead the creation of the city's main COVID communications materials that have been internationally recognized by the BBC, nationally on CNN, as well as in local media. The innovation team has also has now been working with the city health department, local community leaders, and residents to create the city's current phase 2 COVID communications campaign focused on vaccine messaging and contact tracing messaging, a campaign called Baltimore versus COVID. And again, really a key prong of the city's messaging to the public during this period. Another thing the innovation team has done is helped coordinate the management, the launch and the management of the Baltimore Health Corps program in collaboration with MOED and the health department. And this is a 275-person economic and public health recovery program that, again, our team has been able to support. So it's been unusual. Those aren't normally things we had always been, the types of things we had always been working on. But during COVID, these are the types of things that leaders asked OPI to work on, and that we think have been we would like to think have been really valuable to the city during this period. Looking to where we are now and looking ahead to the upcoming fiscal year, really exciting, I think, time for the city and for the work of our office under Mayor Scott, and a city administrator, Mr. Shorter, who are very much committed to using data and evidence-based management to manage the work of government. If anything, data is more central than ever to what government is trying to do. So in terms of what that's meant so far and what I see it meaning, in the near future, we've already launched a re-energized program of stats, a very robust police stat that the mayor not only just participates in, but is actively involved, engaged in a really meaningful way, that is really I believe going to be really impactful. We have Clean Stat, which is a multi-agency effort working with the agencies who have different responsibility for various elements of keeping the city clean. That's a collaborative effort to work to improve the performance and service delivery of those agencies. That's those are two of the major stats. We have several more on the way, including a youth stat, something that the mayor has also announced recently, the concept of a neighborhood stat, which we're very excited about, and also likely some kind of stat around water billing, and no doubt more to come beyond that, based on the where we think data is going to be most impactful in terms of improving government's management of key services. I'll also note, in terms of public-facing tools, really pleased about the development of a public tracker, which allowed the residents to follow the progress of the new administration in terms of delivering on key priorities in the first 100 days of the mayor's term. So that 100-day tracker was a way, I think was a pretty notable, kind of step forward in terms of transparency for the public in terms of following what the city was doing. That's city stat. A couple of things on the other aspects, other parts of our office. The Data Fellows program, as I mentioned, they're focused on data analysts helping to build and support the operations of agencies. So one of those data fellows is working closely with the water meter shop, developing tools that are going to allow them to deploy their crews more efficiently and effectively, so that they can be, in an even better operation. We also have a fellow who's working to develop metrics connected to the 911 call diversion pilot, which again, really think is a really important piece of work. The innovation team, meanwhile, currently working collaborating on a multimedia toolkit to increase language accessibility for limited English proficiency residents in Baltimore. That's in collaboration with MEMA. And again, developing a set of tools that all city agencies will be able to use in terms of improving their translation services for the public. And we're working closely with the mayor. Again, really excited the way the mayor and the city administrator are putting data at the heart of how they're managing the city. There's which is exactly what our office is here to support. That's a quick overview of what we have been up to during COVID and what I see ahead for us as a team. And I will pause there for questions.
Thank you. Dan, can you take the presentation down, please? Thank you. Mr. President?
Mr. Chair, I'm okay right now.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett?
Yeah, I guess the question I had on this was, you mentioned the neighborhood stat, city stat. Can you just, I guess, walk us through what those meetings look like, who's there, and I guess, are there outcomes of the meeting those meetings or strategies that'll be publicly available either on Open Baltimore or just sort of figuring out like what's the public facing version of that people can expect to be able to engage with.
Thank you, Councilman. Both of those meetings have not actually launched yet, so I'll do my best to answer what I can tell you about them right now, but won't have the full description that maybe based on what you said, and I'm glad to share more as they actually officially get underway. In terms of neighborhood stat, I think the exciting thing there is it will be looking at a broad set of city services and how equitably those services are being delivered across the city. So I very much would expect there to be a public-facing product, maybe a dashboard that allows us and the public to be looking at the same key information associated with that. But again, I think we'll need to develop what key measures we're looking at again. But the key, I think, unique thing about that neighborhood is that it's going to be a step that's really looking at the neighborhood level and not so much at one particular service. It's going to be looking at all services and how well the city is delivering for all neighborhoods. Youth stat, likewise, I think for all of our stats, the aim is to have a public facing way for residents to view that same key information that we are looking at in those stat meetings. Youth stat, again, still in development in terms of like the focus area. It is definitely going to be something that obviously involves the main city agencies that serve and support youth in various ways, including the Mayor's Office of Children and Family Success. I think we are still working out, how wide a set of stakeholders may be in different parts of that forum. It is definitely going to be, I think, a potentially a wider meeting in a way that is a bit different than, let's say, a single agency focused stat process. So again, I think a lot more to say on that in the weeks ahead.
Got it. And second quick follow-up on that, is the intention, I guess, the metrics that you're using in those meetings, and maybe, I don't know if this is a question for you or a question to finance, but I would think it would be useful for those to be in alignment with what we're measuring success for the agencies overall, like the metrics that are in the budget books, just to sort of tie it back to dollar impact and sort of that coordinated lens that I think is all helpful for us. Are you able to, I guess, answer that? You know, will the metrics used for success or impact in the city stat model inform what we have in the budget books to sort of overall assess how tax dollars are being used in different ways related to these services?
Yeah, great question. The answer is yes. We will be aligning our measures, particularly as we are launching these new stats processes to align as closely as possible to those measures, so that there's a connected way of thinking about performance and the financing of the work of the city. I think there's a lot more we can and will be doing in the year ahead to make sure we're well integrated in those processes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dan, what are we doing? Schleifer, I got you next. Dan, what are we doing around police recruit stat? We were doing something there, right?
That's right. Yeah, so police. So the recruitment is still just a section in the overall police stat meeting. So which we have every 2 weeks, and there is a recruitment and hiring section that we always have in that as part of that process. It used to be a distinct meeting. I think there's pros and cons to doing it different ways, but I think the benefit of it all being under one roof is you have the mayor there looking at the data, asking the tough questions about that alongside all of the other aspects of what the police department does, in that main police stat meeting.
Tell me the story about what you guys are learning from that specific piece of the police stat with respect to recruiting.
So first of all, I think 2020 was the best hiring year in terms of just total number hired in 12 years. So to me, that was progress was pretty significant last year. Look, I mean, a lot of what I think that what we do in that meeting when we had a distinct recruit stat from and what we're still doing in the police stat meeting is we look at each step in the hiring process. So you can tell whether you're getting enough applications, whether you're getting enough folks passing the fitness test, whether you're getting enough folks coming through the background investigation stage. And I think that level of visibility into the process allows you to diagnose like where some of the challenges are. And I wouldn't say there's like a single story on that. Again, the last few years have been a really notable year in terms of applications to the BPD, which is really, really exciting. But again, you've got to support people to move through the process. And I'd say at different points in our police stat meeting, we're focused on different aspects depending on what the data is saying about challenges. But there's not like one, to me, overarching story about what we focus on in the meeting. We try to take a holistic look at that process.
Is there a part of the process that is, I don't want to say more painful, but is more of a bottleneck than other parts of the process that can actually be fixed? And if so, what is it?
Again, I think it kind of varies. I think anything you can do to any of these steps, and again, a lot of them are mandated, as they are. I think a key area that the innovation team had looked at that I think is still kind of ripe for, consideration about how you can, modify it in various ways is the fitness test. That is an area that is, has, I think, less restrictions around it in terms of what the state demands. So I think there's all kinds of things you can be doing. We had previously piloted a program, which was basically an opportunity for folks to train to get in shape for the fitness test. There's that. There's all kinds of ways we could be potentially thinking about that. You can imagine, partnering with gyms in other cities where where folks may be applying from. So I think there's to me, that's a part in the hiring process where there's particular room for creative solutions and evolving how that particular aspect of the process works. Some of the other steps are again, you're a little more constrained just based on rules from the state.
Thank you. Councilman Schleifer. And after that, we have Ramos and Conway.
Thanks a lot. So I got a few different questions, but I'll break it off into two separate things. Your office, your line item on the budget has a 50% increase from last year, this past year to next year. So that's obviously a pretty significant increase in budget. And so can you explain what that increase is going towards?
Good afternoon, Councilman. So just to kind of clarify, this budget maintains the current level of service for city staff. Previously, it was 2 activities, 18 and 20. It is now combined into 1 activity, performance and innovation.
So what were the other lines? Because it says on page 348 in the activity under service 125, our performance and innovation, it shows last year had a budget of 1.1 and this coming year a budget of 1.7. So where was the other one last year in the budget book?
Activity 18, just above it, which had a budget last year and is now zeroed out for FY2022.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you so much for clarifying that. So the other question I have is you brought up this complex system of tracking the workforce since we've been working remotely. So based on what you've seen, has remote working been working in the city?
Councilman, that's a great question. So if I'm honest about this tool, that tool is really about who is where and in what category of work. That actual tracker is not specifically tracking, let's say, the performance of, a particular unit, which is a slightly, different question, meaning you're making sure where people are and what, whether they are, what category of leave they're using or not, but it's not a performance. It's not that tracker in itself isn't a performance tool. I mean, I can speak to my office's, sort of functionality working remotely, which in my opinion has worked, by and large quite well in terms of like the work of, the type of work we do, translating to, doing that work virtually. I can talk a little bit about the agencies that we have stat programs for and what we've seen from their work, though to be honest, that the stats tend to focus on more operational agencies and the functions of staff that are continuing to do their work, in person. So the tracker tool is really just understanding who is where and doing what, but not so much the performance of those particular individuals.
Okay, so just some clarity on that. Why would that be under performance and innovation if it's not about performance or innovation? So I mean, clearly, depending on the function, I'm sure some things, some jobs are working better remote than they would in person, and vice versa. I mean, we're seeing both of those across the board. And so, why is your team working on this? Why is this not a function of HR?
I totally agree in terms of this not being a non-traditional use of CityStat. It was, again, to me, that's part of the emergency moment of COVID, where when we're normally holding performance management meetings, at the start of COVID, we are being asked to develop tools that provide some kind of operational insight into, for city leaders. That you're absolutely right to say that is a very, atypical, that is not a performance management meeting or tool in and of itself. And again, that is, I think, as we look ahead, sort of emerging out of COVID, I think it's really important that we focus on the core performance management work of CityStat, which again, I would say this is an example of something in COVID that was a bit different and, a little bit distinct from our quote unquote core business.
All right, and my second question, you're talking about clean stat. And so from what I'm hearing from constituents all the time, especially older constituents, they're saying the city is dirtier now than it's ever been in their lifetime. And so what is going on at CityStat to address this? Is CityStat seeing that that is the problem across the board, or is what you're seeing different than what we're hearing from our constituents?
So I think what's exciting about the work of CleanStat right now is the mayor and the city administrator are, really demanding a level of granular tracking and visibility into the work that is going to have the type of results that I know everyone and residents are really, really eager for. So I think in some senses, this iteration of CleanStat, I think, is building really key foundations in terms of some of the tools and tracking that we are going to be able to do that is going to, again, I think over time, really start to make a difference in terms of the city's level of cleanliness. I don't know if the city administrator wanted to add anything beyond that, but that's the, that's what we're focused here, building the systems to allow us to track and performance manage in a much more holistic way over time.
Dan, I don't think anybody's going to question, the mayor or the city administrator's intent on cleaning the city up. We both know that they're 110% committed to that. What I'm referencing is, we've been hearing about this even prior to this administration coming in only a few months ago, about CleanStat, about performance and innovations efforts towards addressing this issue. So all I'm just asking is pretty simple, like, what has CleanStat been doing? What has your office, performance and innovation, been doing over the past year or 2 years to address cleaning up the city? And are you seeing that we've been trending in the right direction, or have you been seeing that we're trending in the wrong direction?
Well, thank you for that question, Councilman. And to the director's point, what the focus really in the redesign, if you will, of the CleanStat process has been pretty phenomenal. So with Dan's leadership and the team, the performance team, I will say that we are looking at staffing, we're looking at equipment, we're looking across the board at our capacity really to deliver on the commitment to services. So we have service level agreements, if you will, for every type of service that we provide. And what we are doing is being thoughtful about how we evaluate. Now, it doesn't change the fact that we are coming out of a pandemic, and that where we have had services that have been slowed down or cut because of the pandemic, now that we are coming back into providing those services, what that means in terms of making very smart decisions with the limited resources that we have. And so whether it's street sweeping, grounds maintenance, or grass cutting, loose litter pickup, the actual recycling and solid waste collection program, all of these programs are being evaluated. And I will say for now, and in the current season that we're in, Rec and Parks, DPW, the Department of Transportation are all on the line, and the right staff are on the line, as well as the mayor and I, to make sure that we are looking at the data associated with these services. I don't know if, again, that answers your question, but I wanted to give a more granular sort of perspective on what's happening in the city staff process.
No, I appreciate that, knowing that, but that doesn't actually answer the question. I mean, the question is really, this is longer than the past 100-day question. This is going back even further. From the information that the Office of Performance and Innovation has seen, have we been moving in the right direction, or have we not been moving in the right direction? What is the data showing?
Councilman, I'd have to get back to you on the sort of comparison. I will say that it is, absolutely the case that, prior to COVID, there was progress being made in terms of the city's cleanliness, and there's been a huge amount of disruption, as you're aware, to the city's operation. So it's a little, I'd have to look at the exact figures. We're not really right now. I'm we're not focused on that particular pre-COVID current comparison. We're focused on using data to improve the current operations. But it is absolutely the case that, this process was and will lead to improvements. It's just, this has been a pretty exceptional period. And again, just to be very tangible about it, staffing has been a huge challenge that has literally disrupted certain services. So, I think it's, fair to say that, yeah, there have been new challenges that we're now, this process is trying to, support agencies to work out of. But again, I think those challenges still exist.
Okay, I mean, those are my first two questions. So I'll wait for my next two.
Thank you for respecting the two question limit. Next up, I think we had Ramos, or did I make that up?
Yeah.
Ramos and then Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. My colleague who's going to follow me used to run City Stat, so I know he's got some good questions for you. My question is around it sounds like you're just starting to reestablish the stat process in several places, and I like the idea of doing it in little bites, water billing stat, et cetera, et cetera. Can you give us a list at some point of all of the stats and how we can get the data from them, but also following up with my colleague about, sort of how the public can be involved, or at least look, give us a sense of what that would look like, but more importantly for us to get the information. And I realize that the stat process is just for what city agencies are doing in terms of performance. So that would be one thing, is to get us that list and how we can maybe get briefings every so often, depending on the committee. Mr. Chair, maybe that's something that we can follow up later on. And then my second question is more of a request. I don't know if you've already started to think about how the housing stats are going to look, but I think it makes sense to do a stat around, lowering the, vacant properties, doing a stat around the city's inventory, doing a stat around, increasing, so it just sort of figuring out how to piece apart some of the stuff that's going on and how we can make sure to have a stat around that. And of course, I'm going to say, go ahead and make sure we're doing an equity stat so that we're monitoring that properly. Thank you.
Councilman Conway. And then Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really good to see you, Director Heimowitz, and of course, ton of respect for the work you guys do, and certainly where we're trying to take the city. The first question that I have is with regard to the budget, and specifically looking at the increase of the budget over the last 2 years. One of the notes in the budget remarked about a $300,000 increase, but when looking at the overall budget, we see a $600,000 increase. I'm a fan for spending money on data. I think it makes everything 1,000 times more efficient. Can you tell me a little bit about what that funding will be going toward and how it's going to help the effort at OPI?
So I'll start to address that these are mostly technical changes to the budget. So we move positions throughout activities. So there is an increase, but we also combined activities as well. So the office still has the same level of staff that it had in previous years. This is a reordering technical adjustment to placing classifications in the correct place to reflect where the work is being done.
Got it. Thank you. The other question, I think, is a little bit of a tag along to Councilman Burnett's question about the budget and performance measures regarding the budget. So when was the last time that OPI or CityStat has reviewed the performance measures in the budget to make sure that they actually align with the service, the quantity of work, the quality of work, and especially the outcomes that we're seeing out of our agencies?
I believe that was it was not in my tenure, which is started in mid 2019, but I believe it was right before that. We absolutely need to do this again. We need this, we need to make sure that we are, I mean, again, my office is primarily focused on performance and the actual, the end result in terms of the services that our residents are receiving from our government. So, but yeah, this to me, the fiscal year we're heading into, one of the core sort of areas of, I think, a bit, systematizing a bit more what we've been doing is alignment to the city's overall planning and budgeting process. So that is something we will absolutely be, be doing in the fiscal year ahead.
Yeah, I'll just to hammer that point home, I think it's incredibly important now having sort of the requirement for me to sort of look through the budget for the first time as opposed to just kind of perusing through it. You realize how important that data is to making sound decisions. And if we are as a council going to make sound decisions on that, it would certainly help if your team can make sure that we're tracking the right things and tracking the right outcomes to make sure that we're making conscious decisions as opposed to hand-waving decisions. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman, if I could add to that response, like the director said, you are absolutely correct in that our agency performance plans should absolutely align with their key performance indicators, and any metrics associated with those plans should align with the budget and should align with an overall strategic plan and vision. And that is absolutely what we are talking through and setting the foundation for right now. So in the coming fiscal year, my hope and what the mayor has committed to publicly is a restart of the community surveys that we used to do to get feedback from our city and from our residents, and to better align what is now performance measures much more broadly and comprehensively. So appreciate that question very much. It is absolutely on the top burner in terms of the year ahead in the work that we plan to do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I got Dorsey and then Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Dan, Chris, hi. Maybe this isn't the right time to bring this up. I'll just ask anyway. Are you guys looking at the challenges of performance monitoring and accountability that arise from the bifurcated system of Salesforce being used for 311 and CityWorks being used internally by agencies? There are certain 311 requests that that generate within an agency or within a division of an agency multiple successive steps that sometimes take days and weeks between one another, that because once the 311 system has the request come in through Salesforce, it gets transferred over internally to CityWorks. There's no external tracking of the various steps within the pursuit of the service.
So thank you, Councilman. So I mean, the way our office, the Office of Performance and Innovation, sort of connects to that, the issue that you're speaking about is, basically there is a interagency work group, IWIT, that is, working to develop some of the reforms, not so much to the systems, but again, at least in terms of a clearly understandable way to communicate to the public the status of various requests. In terms of for our stat meetings, it's really important to find ways to use data to understand what's actually happening, in the real world. And so, and the experience that residents are having. And so the way that we, have been doing that, for instance, is, return to somewhat traditional stat approach of inspections to complement some of the quantitative data that we're using. I know that's not a system-wide solution, and there's a lot more that I'm sure BCIT and others could say about what's being done on that. But just to say, in the context of our performance management meetings, we are, we take that distinction of, again, what it actually looks like in the real world, and really seriously, and try to get to the bottom of it. So we're having actual performance conversations about what the agencies are delivering.
Okay, I'm asking about this because it's kind of at the core of what we're dealing with in the nuisance auto parking work group that is tasked with studying and reporting on the problem of nuisance auto business parking. And Councilwoman Porter and I are both part of this work group. And one of our core concerns has to do with these various steps. And we can't figure out any way to transparently evaluate whether or not things are being done the best that they can be, that we are getting the best performance, the level of performance that we need to make improvements, because everything is being done within city works, and even DOT's data analyst doesn't have access to that division's city works operations, only the sales force. So I can't even rely on the agency's own data analysts to evaluate these things.
What I'll say, and Councilman, I'm happy to sort of make sure that we better understand the exact challenges that you are dealing with the work group. But the system, the Salesforce system, is certainly capable. It is our business process that in some cases needs to catch up. And so, where we are transferring an item from one agency to the other and not necessarily closing that item, these are all things that the system allows for us to do and for us to communicate as a CRM or a customer relationship management system typically does, to communicate with our residents. We just need the business process in place. CityWorks also communicates with Salesforce, that these are not two systems that can't communicate. So I just want to make sure that we understand more fully what those concerns are. Some of this is certainly borne out in a stat, but this is not something that Dan would necessarily be able to respond to very specifically, because these are more sort of citywide operational issues that I want to make sure that we pull in the appropriate directors to respond to.
Well, then I'd like to follow up to make sure that we get all the appropriate folks aware of the nitty gritty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks everyone for being here this afternoon. Sometimes I just wonder if city stats, excuse me, actually know exactly what's really going on with city agencies. I've been a part of DPW for over maybe 16, 17 years, and all you hear all day long was, city stats said this, city stats said that. And I'm wondering if you guys are actually collecting the right data to make sure that the city is really getting its money's worth, meaning when it comes to constituent services. Because what happens is that you'll get a 311 call about a dirty alley, and you also get that 311 call in reference to that dirty alley that may go over to just say a housing issue. And the person that made the complaint may get one, SR number. And what happens is that the city will go in and take care of the one complaint that may be the dirty alley and not the debris that's coming from out of, say, a vacant city-owned property. They'll close that alley out. And what we start doing is we'll start getting emails sent to us saying that the SR has been taken out, saying it's been closed, but you still have that home that's owned by the city with debris coming out because of there really wasn't an SR created for that particular property. So I think my question is, how do we know that we're really getting the accurate information? Because city stats isn't there, at the, place where this trash, debris, whatever has to be taken up. All you guys are getting is the data from a crew saying it's been TCO'd. And a lot of times it hasn't been TCO'd. So how are you keeping up with the data in real time to make sure that those that are put in and say that it's been taken care of, that aren't really being taken care of, how are you, how can you provide and show us the data for the ones that have been said they've been taken care of but has not been taken care of?
Thank you, Councilman. So first of all, would welcome anytime these specific situations that you're mentioning, if those are happening, we would definitely want to hear about it. That's of course not what we that's of course of concern. Again, I think first of all, it kind of depends on the systems, but to some extent, first of all, some systems there is there's photos of the completed work that you can actually use to consider whether the work was done or not. Again, we've been increasingly looking to complement the quantitative work with various types of inspections that sense check whether the quantitative data is telling the right story. It is absolutely our intent to kind of pull together a picture that allows us to understand those distinctions. And again, we if that's ever happening, what you described, that's something we really want to hear about, and obviously is of concern, and something that our systems need to be able to review and make sure is not happening routinely.
I think can I ask another question, Mr. Chair? I apologize. I think one of the issues that we have here is that we're passing the buck on to other agencies where I think we can take care of certain situations like head on right then and there, where if we have, again, that vacant home that has debris coming out of that home and a bobcat going in there to take the debris out and there's a TCO, why not allow that bobcat and that crew to also do the alley? Because it's like defeating the purpose. What we're doing is, again, we're passing things on to housing, we're passing things on to solid waste, we're passing things on to whatever agencies there are, and it's like defeating the purpose. And I know because I've been there for 17 years. So sometimes when I hear the stats of things or whatever, like a lot of it doesn't even make sense to me because I'm there actually in real time seeing it. And then I know it when you have a superintendent that comes down to city stats and you guys, you kind of grill them on things that hadn't been done when a lot of things have been done. And again, I think it's because of the fact that we have multiple agencies dealing with some of the same complaints and they're just not getting taken care of.
I mean, as far as Councilman, as far as the operational question, that's that's I think not a question I'm really in a position to answer for the agencies you're referring to. But I mean, just to say, like again, if that data that we're reviewing and reporting on is not
it's not accurate,
telling the right story, and if that's
accurate,
then that's not the kind of that's not going to be effective performance management. So we strive to make sure we're looking at data that actually means something in the context of whatever issue area we're looking at. I'd like to think when we're talking to someone like a superintendent, we're having a fair conversation based on the best available data that tells the picture of, the story of the thing that they are in charge of.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Dan, Councilman Stokes, then I got one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. City Administrator Shorter and Dan, maybe you can answer this question. I hear all about the stats, the data. How are we educating the community? Because people don't know when the recycling days is. They don't know what time to put the trash out, whether go out on the front, whether go out on the back. You can get all the data you want. But if we not educate the community about what they responsible for, even the code, city code, what you responsible for in the back of your alley, clean up the alley to the front. Because if everybody swept in front of their door, we don't need mechanical sweepers. So where's the education piece, I think, that's so important about having the community be responsible and let them know what they recycling and they trash. I think we need to do that also.
This is very helpful, and certainly, Councilman, thank you for that. And I'll be sure to work with DPW to make sure that we are educating the communities, especially those communities where we see the most complaints through 311 or otherwise, where residents are just not aware or are confused about the routes and the services that are being provided.
Real quick, Mr. Shorter. I have a community, Broadway East, and they cut city-owned grass and they own the lots. Why are we not looking at communities to do that? Because when we talk about equity, we give grants to people that look like me, but they give contracts to people that's cutting the grass. Why are we not using our community and allow them to cut the grass? And what that does, that cuts back on the load that DPW has. If you ride around, they're behind on cutting grass. Why are we not looking at that? Because Broadway East is cutting 100 lots. They want some more. They train people to cut them. So just a suggestion, Mr. Shorter, I think we should look at that and see how we can have the communities, if they got the equipment to cut the lots, and get contracts, not grants. Grants is grants. Contracts you get to, it's more money, and they can handle more lots because it requires a lot more money.
Thank you for that, Councilman.
The burning question that I've had for this entire week, this is for the city administrator and for Dan. I'm going to rattle off a list of agencies: HCD, DPW, DOT, Rec and Parks, Housing Authority of Baltimore City, Department of General Services, and Baltimore City's public school system. Do you know what all of those agencies have in common? I don't expect anyone to know this, but they all cut grass. And to me, that just seems insane. And it's something that my predecessor on the council was complaining about over a decade ago. Council Vice President Middleton has been complaining about this for well over a decade. Is there an opportunity to look at mowing grass and doing it more efficiently?
I certainly do believe that there's an opportunity for, and I will say that many of the same contractors and partners are engaging all those agencies on separate contracts to cut separate parcels. And so, yes, there's absolutely an opportunity for us to work more seamlessly together. Now, what that looks like, especially given what Councilmember Stokes just said, in terms of us making sure that the contracts are not so big that smaller firms cannot bid competitive and be competitive, is something that we need to work through with those respective agencies. But I think there is a balance that we have not gotten right yet. There's a balance to make sure that we are working together, that we are creating economies of scale in terms of the grounds maintenance process. But there is also the need for us to be equitable and to make sure that we open up this work for smaller firms. And so that is certainly the balance that we'll be trying to strike in the coming year.
Glover, I got you next. Mr. City Administrator, I really appreciate that response. And I'm also going to bring this up during the DGS hearing. To me, it seems to make sense that DGS would be the entity within city government most capable of managing that type of process. But I really appreciate the thoughtful response. We're going to go Glover, and then we're going to go Schleifer. And as a reminder, our next session is starting in 5 minutes, so I'd ask everyone to try and be as brief as possible. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll speed it up. Mr. Shorter, just a suggestion. You know, right here in my particular district of East Baltimore, District 13, by way of Edison Highway, we have already a transfer station there. So what I'm asking you to do is if you could look into that facility, it's Baltimore Recycling Company. I think that the city could save so much money from riding those trucks from East Baltimore, Northeast Baltimore, Southeast Baltimore, down to Resco and also down to Quarantine Road, where we have a facility that's been there operating, where I see trucks coming from Harford County, coming to dump. They take recycling, trash, debris, all that stuff. They're right here in the city of Baltimore. They give back to our community. And I'm just saying, before we do a study at Bowley's Lane and take money out of the budget to create a transfer station over there, it may take 3-4 years from my understanding for that to happen. But I think right now will be the best opportunity for us to have those vehicles and those loads transferred over to Baltimore Recycling Company, which they're willing to do, where they could take the load down to the Resco, down to Quarantine Road, as opposed to having the laborers and the drivers drive a half an hour to 2 hours in the line at the dump, waiting to dump their vehicle to get back on that route. So I think that would be the ideal thing to do. I know it's the best thing to do because, again, I've been there, I lived it, and I hope that you guys take in consideration of doing that. And I appreciate it, the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Councilman Schleifer.
Yeah, just a quick statement for my question. You know, when we were talking about the programs that giving grants and other things to nonprofits and other groups to do this street cleaning, you know, I've personally watched as groups and nonprofits and organizations have cleaned, you know, by the street or swept by the street, picking up debris, and they spend hours on end doing that. And a street sweeper can come down and clean that exact same debris in 15 minutes time and saving all that manpower. So I don't think that that's the most efficient way to clean up the streets. It's certainly helpful in certain circumstances, but not in the overall way they've been being used over the years. My question for you, Dan, is can you give us a few examples of how your office has initiated and innovated a major part of city government?
So I would cite a couple of different things. So first of all, I think in terms of the work that our team has done during COVID, in terms of the COVID communications campaign, which I think early on was some of the most cutting edge public messaging. Yes, it was sort of an unusual role for our innovation team to be supporting that function, but we're really proud of that campaign and the more sustained Baltimore versus COVID campaign, which was founded on deep research using data and human-centered design to inform the development of that. Again, I think really unique campaign. Another COVID example from the innovation team is developing, again, in collaboration with other partners, this case MOED and the health department, the Baltimore Health Core program. And I think what was unique about that, everyone created contact tracing programs. What was distinct about Baltimore's efforts was to tightly align employment development objectives, career development approaches with the hiring of hundreds of workers into this program. The tight integration of that is something that I think was really distinctive in terms of the way the city approached its contact tracing program.
Okay. So can you give us like a couple examples of, ways that your agency has saved the city money by innovating the way any functions of the city government has been done?
So, Councilman, if I'm honest, at least the current projects the innovation team has worked on have not specifically focused on, let's say, process improvements that specifically were focused at cost savings. When we're working closely with the police department in terms of its improving its recruitment and hiring systems, we're focused on a more diverse and more local officers for the city, and what systems and processes we can develop with those partners to do that. So there's a version where our team is deployed on something that's a little more focused on that's something that's cost savings as the kind of the focus of the project to date. Our city leaders have asked the team to work on other types of challenges. We'd welcome that type of work, but again, it's whatever the thing we're trying to support. In that case, it's more officers, more diverse officers. It's not a cost savings project per se.
So I mean, even not necessarily a cost savings, a dollar amount, but when we talk about performance and innovation, usually you get something more out of what you already have going on. So even if you haven't saved a dollar on a program, that you've increased the performance of a program by innovating it. So I'll give an example of something that what I'm looking for.
Councilman, I'm gonna ask you to make this as brief as possible because we're 2 minutes past.
Sure. An example would be when e-permits were developed 5 years ago out of the housing department. That's a process that improved the permitting process. It was innovative, and it has helped improve that whole system. So I'm just looking for just maybe one example where your team took a project on, that it was your project, not necessarily supporting, a marketing campaign from, the health department or something, but something in the city that you guys have improved performance on, and you guys have innovated that function of government.
So, Councilman, just to say, I mean, first of all, I did think you were specifically asking about the innovation team. I'm glad to. I don't know if we'll have time now to talk about the role of city stat and some of the the performance management processes there. But I think all these are examples of the city improving how it is serving residents in some way. And again, it's just these are different types of problems or processes you can work on. In terms of the fact that we, the examples I'm describing, partnerships with city agencies, that's how we work. We are a hub that brings data and human-centered design to support improved performance and innovations with things that other city agencies are doing. That police recruitment and hiring example, I think that's a great story of a partnership with an agency, and that agency improving with the support and approaches of the innovation team. That's how the innovation team works, and how I would see us, at least in our current model, continuing to work in the future, at least as we're currently kind of structured.
All right, so I mean, we can take this offline in the interest of time. All I'll say is that the budget for this line item is $1.7 million, and I would love to have a conversation offline to understand what we're getting for $1.7 million.
Dan, can you find time to connect directly with Councilman Schleifer to have that conversation?
I'd welcome the chance.
Today or tomorrow, please. Councilman, can you please make time to have that today or tomorrow? Thank you. All right.
Can I be a part of it, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely. Either you guys can coordinate or separate conversations, whatever works for everyone's schedules. Colleagues, is everyone good on this session?
Actually,
Dan,
Mr. Chair, I just have one. Actually,
yes, sir, Mr. President.
Yeah, so I I think one common theme that we've heard throughout the entire presentation is it kind of goes to like the complete chasm or disconnect between the council's involvement with CityStat and like what CityStat actually does. And I know it's not just this administration, but the foundation of how CityStat was created has always been, you know, this lack of involvement with the council associated with CityStat. I guess, Dan, not for you to develop on this call, but just wondering, moving forward, is there a way for you to, you know, develop quantitative and qualitative indicators to show the council on a regular basis, maybe a frequency of once a quarter, kind of the involvement of what CityStat is doing to improve, you know, the constituent services that these council members are kind of involved with on an hourly basis. Again, I kind of see that as the theme, and I think many of the council members truly appreciate the importance of big data and analyzing it in a way to drive better operation and systems. But I think the disconnect is, you know, we're just completely shut out of, you know, what you guys do on a regular basis. So if there's a way to develop, again, some type of like quantitative or qualitative type of feedback to the council on a reoccurring basis, I think that, you know, when we come to these budget sessions, we will be a lot more prepared and understanding and knowing the benefit of the performances that that we talk about every budget year.
Thank you, Council President. And yeah, would love to work out a way to provide you know, more visibility into the you know, the work that we're supporting.
Mr. President, you good?
Yep, I'm good.
Thank you. Dan, we have a opening on 12:30 to 1:30 on Monday, June 7th. So we might ask you to come back just to continue this conversation. I'll speak with President about that. But we do have a 1 hour opening. So please just keep that open for now. That's Monday, June 7th from 12:30 to 1:30. Dan, I want to thank you for all your great work and spending time with us today. And we'll definitely be in touch and appreciate you following up with Council Members Schleifer and Glover directly. We're going to go into recess for about a minute while BSIC gets set up. Thank you.
Oh, okay.